Hello, today I am a gamer. So I didn't really want my first video on this channel to be about a specific drama involving specific people, but goddamn if the opportunity wasn't thrusted upon me in a way I couldn't deny. Thankfully, at least now I have the skill to use specific situations as examples of larger topics in need of discussion rather than the topics themselves. So what is the topic today?
Brown people.
Well, okay, more so the various ways in which white people have hijacked us fighting back against our oppression for their own gain. Specifically in the online gaming sphere, and even more specifically for this video, in the Dead by Daylight community. A very sinister act when put on paper, but the truth, as with many things in life, is much more complicated, with backgrounds, age, various other things, and yes, intent playing a role. Intent is context. Never all of it, mind you, nor an excuse for bad actions, but no small part either, as with all of the other facets mentioned. All of these factors paint a situation differently and can either make it more or less sympathetic, and in my opinion, should inform us of how we handle them. With that, I would like to explain a little bit more about what we're going to be doing here. The purpose of today's video is to explore situations where I believe the topic of today has happened, all the way from totally dishonestly and purposefully to probably completely incidentally. So yes, the title is kind of clickbait, and not every single person here will be an intentional fake woke hijacktivist. But stick around anyways, I think it'll be worth it. So let's get started. First of all, what even is Dead by Daylight? Well, Dead by Daylight is an asymmetrical 4v1 horror game consisting of survivors and unalivers. I need money. The game includes a wide range of characters that is pretty ethnically and racially diverse, that includes both licensed characters from other franchises as well as original characters. This will be important later. If I'm honest, Dead by Daylight is, I think, the only game I've ever played and gotten involved with its online community. Now granted, I did take a 1.5 year long break from the game after I got a full-time job, who could have guessed? But I still occasionally checked in on the creators I religiously watched when I was actively playing. Demi, JRM, Aaron, deadgirljimmie, remember this one, and Spook and Jukes, just to name a few off the top of my head. Spook and Jukes in particular is someone whose content I've always enjoyed watching, as not only does he post gameplay content, but has kind of been the community watch for Dead by Daylight, which I think is really cool. He covers a lot of drama that goes on in the community and has helped a lot of smaller content creators out, especially when getting bullied by larger DBD content creators, which is unfortunately not as uncommon as we'd like to think. One of the most popular instances of this would be seen in his videos about a Twitch streamer who we'll be calling Shortbread, who is also our first example. So who is Shortbread? Well, he's a Dead by Daylight streamer who was primarily called out by Spook and Jukes for his completely abysmal behavior, which just seemed to grow in quantity over the course of his coverage. I do recommend you watch those videos made by the man himself if you want to get the full story on Shortbread's actions. But the thing I want to point out is that when Shortbread was called out for this behavior, one of his go-to rebuttals against the criticisms, besides a bunch of dumb shit like claiming he's being harassed by Spook and Jukes, was to allege that Spook and Jukes is a racist.
One of us has been caught using the N-word. You're a racist because you admitted and apologized to saying the N-word. Oh, that makes you a racist, my friend. You literally admitted you fucked up and said the N-word out of bad taste. Can any of you tell me where I was racist like he was? You will not be able to.
Now, to explain this, basically the context is that in an old video, a black guy that Spook and Jukes went up against in the game threatened violence against him afterwards and used the phrase, and at some point Spook and Jukes quoted it back to him while mocking how pressed he was. This is, in my opinion, inappropriate, and Spook and Jukes would agree, which is why he apologized for it multiple times. Now, obviously, that is not my apology to accept, but even then, I can point out the facts that the usage did not come from out of nowhere on his end, and even then he did acknowledge that it was wrong of him and hasn't used the word since. Shortbread, though, is a bit of a different story, as it was revealed in one of these videos that Shortbread had a habit of not only using the casual N-word, but the hard R.
And as you can see, if you search the N-word with an A at the end of it, Look at everything that pops up. Look at how many times Shortbread has said this word. And not only has he used the N-word multiple times with an A at the end of it, he's also used it with the hard R as well. Once again, I blurred that out, but I have the uncensored version that I can post to Twitter at any time. If anybody wants to claim this is fake, I have it all.
So, call me crazy, but I think it's fair to say that Shortbread doesn't actually care about racism in the way he wants you to believe. And it sucks because racism is a rampant issue in the community, which is something I don't believe is unique to DPD at all, and I've dealt with myself on a number of occasions. And this pattern is something I've seen several times throughout Spook and Juke's content, as well as with other people. People being called out will immediately run to racism as an accusation, not to actually condemn racism in the community, but to find something they think will make whoever they're mad at look bad enough that their cruelty is justified, or make the criticisms against them null. And this pattern makes me exhausted, which is not great because that's how I wake up every day. And to anyone in a privileged position in society who may be watching this, especially racial, I want you to just try and empathize with all the negative emotions that come from this. Because I'm gonna get real for a second here, and it might be a little uncomfortable. My life as a queer brown person is inherently and permanently politicized because I am that demographic. I do not have the privilege to truly live and act for myself because everything I do is a political statement. And it's not only me. Black women especially deal with this. One notable example is with their hair. Anything a Black woman does with her hair is a political statement in society. And my rights are, how my very existence is a constant and loud political debate, and one that does real harm to my community. Some of you watching this may be people who are from my old channel. And if you remember, when I started making videos there, I used an avatar that was basically as white as you can get without being a ghost. I know other people have done this too, and I might make a video going into more detail, but for reference, I was dealing with racism on the regular and it was exhausting. So I hid my racial identity behind that persona, and I don't blame any person of color who chooses to do the same or doesn't make it that known. It was a chance for me to do what I want and talk to people without being reminded of what I am, because I am reminded. I am reminded every single day. And so then to see my oppression and the bigotry against my communities disingenuously weaponized to bolster personal grievances, it's a bit annoying to say the least. Because all that stuff I just talked about my life as this demographic, they don't care. My pain, the bigotry, and the promises of harm towards my community are simply a tool for these people to get a leg up in an argument, because they know other people care about the issue. Meanwhile, they just get to ignore my humanity. And that's not to say that there aren't spaces specifically designed to help that community to be heard and acknowledged. And there are movements with the express goal of making that more of a normalcy. I really appreciate those spaces and movements and have taken solace in some of them because they promised that I would be heard. Until I wasn't. Let's get into it.
We'll be right back after these messages.
And here we have the catalyst for me making this video, as this is actually a video idea I've had for well over a year, and I thought I would have had to wait longer into my return to YouTube for something to come along to re-prompt me into speaking up about this issue. But girl, is how we start my return. So real quick, before I get into specifics about this issue, I do want to add a little disclaimer that the main subject, Jimmie, has already apologized and this situation is mostly blown over from what I can tell. So my intent here is not to revive the drama that occurred, but I would be remiss to just let this slip under the radar for me, as though it is not one of the most fruitful, prime, and recent examples of today's very topic happening. Also, before I sat my ass down here to write about this example, I got condescended about the issue of racism racism and disregarded by several white people on Twitter, one of whom literally told me to shut the fuck up. So you know I had to get up here and scream these points even louder. Because there are many things in this world that I will put up with, but listen when I say a white person talking down to me as though I do not understand the issues that plague my very being is not one of them. So as previously mentioned, just to get my bias known, I've been a fan of deadgirljimmie for years. And part of what I liked about her is that she was a queer indigenous content creator. I've bonded with Jimmie over our shared indigenous heritage and have felt very at home in her chats, especially because of the aforementioned, during a time when things were not going so hot in the world, much like now. So what happened? Well, in 2022, Dead by Daylight released its 24th chapter, Roots of Dread, and with it came a new original survivor by the name of Hattie Kaur. Hattie is an Indian girl who lives in Canada who develops supernatural powers. I honestly can't be bothered to learn the exact specifics of her story by reading through paragraphs upon paragraphs of lore for a game I barely play, but from what I understand, this power has led her to tussling with some demons, and as such, Homegirl has some scars to prove it. Unfortunately, and I think this would have happened regardless, because original survivor characters in Dead by Daylight don't have much personality or characterization if you don't read through the lore, a bunch of the discourse about Hattie has become whether she's ugly or not, which, okay, personally, I don't think she's ugly, but one question I want to ask that no one really seems to be asking is, why would it really matter if she's hot or not? Like, I seriously wonder if a white man, or any man really, but let's just go with white man for the sake of simplicity. If a white man was given this same kind of design choice, would his beauty or lack thereof really be such a talking point in regards to the character? I don't think so. But because women are expected to be beautiful and ethnic non-white features are largely deemed to be less beautiful, even just subconsciously, it doesn't surprise me that this became such a talking point over a South Asian girl who has a scarred up face. Like, I know she's a video game character, but I do believe it's reflective of the real world pattern to put so much worth into a woman's beauty, especially a brown woman. Like, obviously insulting ethnic features, racialized features, is racist, like making fun of black people's lips or East Asian people's eyes, and there is such a thing as racist caricatures, but Hattie's crime seems to be not being conventionally attractive, and that makes me sad. Like, why aren't brown women allowed to have rugged or edgy features without being devalued? Like, sometimes I wonder if Zuko was a girl, would that giant ass face scar fly the same way? But anyways, what does this have to do with Jimmie? Well, recently Jimmie saw the discourse about Hattie being called ugly, and from there made a video calling Hattie ugly, hearted comments doing the same, and was outed for liking homophobic tweets in the past. And with all that mentioned, you might be surprised to hear that Jimmie isn't really the person I'm going after. No. My beef lies with the plethora of white people, and some brown people, who completely mishandled this incident and warped the situation into something way worse than it was and dehumanized the shit out of Jimmie. Because what I just told you, that's not the full story, but it sure was the one that made the rounds on Twitter. So let's go ahead and play the actual clip that caused a huge stink.
Actually, you know what? You know why I'm playing Hattie today? Dude, I saw a post on Twitter of people calling Hattie ugly. If you guys didn't know, Hattie is Indian, and a lot of people were saying that they don't like playing her because she's Indian, and I thought that was crazy, and it made me feel so freaking bad. So I'm supporting all the Indians today, and I'm gonna be playing Hattie for a while. Isn't that so sad? People saying she's ugly because she's Indian, or that like she's like, look at her, look how gorgeous she is. How can anyone say that she's ugly?
Oh, so you mean in the video she actually brought attention to the racism and said that she thinks Hattie's beautiful and condemned the people calling her ugly? Okay, beyond that, I might actually be crazy, but I cannot figure out what is so offensive about this clip. We'll go over a lot of the reasons later, but the main one I want to bring up is that people claim this clip is performative, to which I would say theoretically anything can be seen as performative, and I really only pay thought to this line of thinking when it's coming from someone in a privileged position doing or saying anything in regards to a marginalized demographic. So in this position, white people. And even then, I really only do pay thought if there's some action that tips me off to question it like that. Because sometimes an act of kindness is all someone sets out to do. And I think shaming that or immediately jumping to calling it performative is a little weird. Like, if that's the case, then what about all the people who, resulting from this, went on to say things like, oh, Hattie's beautiful and I need her. Like, is that not also performative? Because, like, it's also not materialistically doing anything for Indians, but I don't think that makes it a bad thing. I think it's up to the person on how they view it, so for me, I personally don't view this that way. Sometimes an act of kindness is all I'm looking for, have time for, or have the mental for. The only other thing I want to address right now is the criticism over the guitar music. So firstly, calm music is a staple in both Jimmie's streams and videos.
Yeah, I'm pretty rusty. I have not played Killer in a good minute. So you guys, give me a break if I play really bad. Let's see if she can last more than a minute. Oh look, that's Hatch! Hatch spawns already? Is she in a freaking locker?
Secondly, what exactly is the issue with gentle music just because the subject is sensitive? Like, fuck, I'm talking about racism while having city pop instrumental in the background to a speed paint of me about to be stabbed by Michael Myers. Guess I'm done for. I don't get it. I've asked around so much to my very leftist friends, and no one does. Maybe if Jimmie was a white woman, I could be convinced on this being an issue, but again, Jimmie's a brown woman. She experiences racism and wanted to point out that it was happening in the community. Now, yes, the way she went about that deserves criticism, but she's not dipping her hands in from the outside from a privileged position. She deals with the issue. So now for the issues outside of the contents of that video, starting with the title and thumbnail, this is something I could see the issue with, as it's essentially inviting people to say racist things about Hattie. So guess what Jimmie immediately changed within a day of the video being up once she was told it was an issue? Yeah! The title and thumbnail. And again, with the way it played out, I would say that the title and thumbnail were ultimately an issue, but I would like to point out that I have seen very progressive creators that I love do this very thing with other issues, and because they pulled it off better or garnered a more specific audience, the outcome was completely fine. So it's not even that I think what ultimately was an issue here necessarily needs to be one 100% of the time. When it comes to her harding potentially racist comments about Hattie, yes, that did happen and is a problem. However, how it happened is not how it was painted. People pointed out that these comments had a heart, but what they failed to point out is that every single comment on every single Dead Girl Jimmie video has a heart. And for someone who pretty much never talks about controversial or heavy topics, mindlessly hearting comments is very much not a big deal. So again, not great, but different. One is very clearly worse and paints a way more sinister picture. And also people, funnily enough, failed to point out that she removed the hearts from those comments when she was made aware of what they said. The liking of homophobic tweets, something that Jimmie had literally already apologized for. Now yes, you could bring up the fact that she made the reckless decision again to mindlessly like things, as with her YouTube comments half a year later, and that's completely fair and it makes sense if you have trouble believing Jimmie's apology after that. However, the person who screenshots proving that Jimmie liked the tweets conveniently forgot to mention that she did apologize. They instead stated that Jimmie saw no problem with the liking of those tweets and showed a screenshot of Jimmie's first response where she misinterpreted the tweet, again not showing that once it was clarified, Jimmie immediately agreed that it was wrong of her to do and apologized, because I guess they didn't screenshot those ones. Very interesting. And might I add that this person was saying this while Jimmie's account was actively down, so people could not see the tweets that she made. Instead, all we got was this person saying that the next response left them disappointed. Motherfucker, you said you appreciated her apology. What disappointment are you talking about? And of course, this person's tweets led to people claiming that Jimmie knew what she was doing and purposefully misinterpreted the tweets because they couldn't fucking see the apology right after. Someone else who I want to put a little bit of a spotlight on is a Twitter user by the name of Lily Fern, who was one of the white women that immediately told Jimmie to delete her platform because of this single issue, and also claimed that Jimmie is a white woman, including after I told her that she's in fact not. I also confronted her approach when she started hounding Jimmie for an immediate statement and apology, because fuck that shit. Seriously, I hate whenever people demand immediacy from someone who's under fire, especially when they're part of the harassment that person is receiving. You're setting up that person to say something else that will feed the fire because they haven't had time to parse through the valid and invalid criticism and formulate a proper response. But I have a feeling you're already aware of that, because this behavior demonstrates a huge lack of compassion, and to direct it at a brown woman in the name of anti-racism is, This is not a serious activist, in my opinion. This is a bully who's using a righteous cause to justify cruelty. The difference between her and Shortbread is that I don't necessarily believe Lily has a ton of skeletons in her closet of her saying the N-word a bunch of times. I think she genuinely believes that because she's championing a righteous cause that does not personally affect her, mind you, that gives her the right to be as cruel as she wants. She also seems to use activism and legitimately good deeds as a form of street cred that she can use to dismiss whenever people question or disagree with her demonstrations of allyship. This is an archetype of white progressive that I really do not fuck with, to be frank. They seem very averse to introspection, especially in regards to their own internal biases, because they do not want to reconcile with that reality. Because while I may not believe she has skeletons in her closet, there are certainly bones in there. And spewing misinformation about a brown woman's race that you have been told is false in what is seemingly an attempt to bolster the inappropriate and destructive approach you took, especially as a white woman, is certainly a bone. That reads to me as more performative and bad faith than anything. And a lot of the black and brown people I've shown your tweets to with full context agree. Absolutely no one in the world is free of sin. Racism has permeated every society on the globe, and it's impossible to avoid internalizing any of it. You can bring up all your good deeds whenever brown people question your allyship as a means of proving that you haven't got a racist bone in your body, but I'm not stupid, and I pick up on things. Like, please, you live in Germany. Why are you acting like you're totally free from internalizing bigoted views and, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense? And not in the way you think it does. For those of you who don't know, Germany is not doing so hot in terms of progressive politics. The USA and Germany twinning in that regard. Strides have been made recently and are to be implemented, but the rise of far-right politics, including political victories, are already being witnessed. One of the more notable ones happened in September, right before the whole situation with Jimmie blew up. With a general election only a year away in Germany, and especially with how the one here went, that's scary. Not just to the marginalized within Germany's population, but for allies on the progressive side of things as well. Seeing the rise in far-right politics and just seeing the injustice and abject bigoted sentiments viewed constantly every day, especially on a site like Twitter nowadays, it's a breeding ground for hypervigilance because it is horrifying and people get desperate to enact some kind of justice in this fundamentally unjust world. Now, I could be full of shit here and Lily could just actually want to be a bully, but I believe that this is a perspective worth acknowledging and one that I am sympathetic to. However, these actions are still inappropriate, and harassing and saying what you did about a brown woman is not going to fix racism or make the world less racist. I seriously implore anyone who is like this to take a step back and look inward. So someone else I really want to talk about right now is an indigenous YouTuber named thecroshow, who made a video about the situation soon after it, I guess, ended, trying to document the timeline of events and give a more internal context to the situation within the game's community. He was very critical of Jimmie's actions, some of which I can appreciate because, as I've made clear, I believe Jimmie did do wrong in this situation. However, I feel like Crow's behavior in this video perfectly encapsulates a lot of the problems I had with how people acted towards Jimmie. And just as a quick note, I actually commented on Crow's video back when it first came out, and a lot of the points I'll be bringing up were at least somewhat detailed in there. Also, Crow actually responded to my comment by completely disregarding me. So, hi! Here I am again.
Now, recently, deadgirljimmie found herself in hot water for poking the bear of the Dead by Daylight community, using race to bait people to watch her content. Now let's watch the original video, and then let's break down why it's an issue.
Dude, I saw a post on Twitter of people calling Hattie ugly. If you guys didn't know, Hattie is Indian, And a lot of people were saying that they don't like playing her because she's Indian, and I thought that was crazy. And it made me feel so freaking bad. So I'm supporting all the Indians today.
I'm supporting all the Indians today. I'm supporting all the Indians today.
And I'm gonna be playing Hattie for a while. Isn't that so sad? People saying she's ugly because she's Indian, or that like she's like, look at her, look how gorgeous she is. How can anyone say that she's ugly?
Yes, you heard that correctly and you saw it correctly. I played Hattie for a few matches to honor all of the Indians and Hattie mains out there. Right off the bat, you don't say that when you're referring to someone else's race or culture. The Indians. That's just gross. Don't word it like that. Before we get any further though, I do want to just say, I don't believe Jimmie had any intention of being racist, and nothing I've seen or heard from Jimmie's content suggests to me that she's racist. And I know these things. I'm native Canadian. I know how to spot a racist from a mile away, and nothing I've seen is enough proof to say that she's racist. I do believe she did mean well. It's just the delivery was really cringe and really gross and racially insensitive. Now, I do believe you can be insensitive about someone's race, but in this case, like, it wasn't malicious. She was actually praising Hattie, saying she's cute and pretty and stuff, and that's appreciated, but you called her the Indian. Like, that's not a nice thing to say.
So first of all, I want to acknowledge that Crow did at least clarify that he doesn't believe Jimmie is a racist in the video, and I do appreciate that. But in regards to the comment, she called Hattie the Indian, that is literally straight up just not true. She did say she was supporting the Indians, but that's not the same thing. Also, if I'm honest, I really think that everyone is stretching for a point here. Replace Indians with any white dominant nationality, and I think it shows how inoffensive the wording is. Honoring the British, honoring the French, honoring the Swiss. Hell, even try honoring the Latinos. Fuck, honoring the Americans. Like, is this really what we're having a stink over? There is truly, as far as I can see, nothing actually condemnable with the wording here. Again, I think that we, as progressives of any color, but especially the brown and black progressives, maybe have a habit of getting a little hypervigilant against anything that doesn't hit our ears right, because we are subject to so much bigoted bullshit on a regular basis that it literally rewires our brains. A lot of us become cynical and distrustful. I know I certainly used to be in 2022 during the rise of bigoted sentiment in the US and the whole fucking groomer libel epidemic, and after the events of November 5th, I'm really struggling not to end up there myself again. However, that doesn't mean that we're right all the time, and I do believe this wording is ultimately not an issue, nor is it gross. I think the word honor here is what's causing this, because it is so trite and sincere that it comes off as insincere, but that's also literally just how Jimmie talks, having watched her for a few years. You can find it cringy, but that doesn't make it an issue. Like if Jonah was getting racist hate and a brown person saw it, denounced it, and said, I'm gonna play Jonah in honor of all the Latinos out there. I'm sorry, but I really feel like you have to look for something to be offended by with that sentiment. Jimmie doesn't have to agree with you saying it's gross, and neither do I, because the points you brought up for why we should find it that way are weak and also based on a misconstruction. From here, Crow criticizes Jimmie for reasons that I believe were valid and starts talking about the inner workings of the DBD community, which is nice for some context relating to the whole situation around Hattie, but isn't really any more helpful than the context I gave in the beginning, and also isn't related to Jimmie, so we're skipping it.
There's a lot of things I need to talk about today, but the first thing I want to talk about is how I've been receiving death threats.
Okay, so the first thing we need to talk about today is how I've been receiving death threats. This is a strategy here employed by many YouTubers, content creators. You immediately start out by trying to get sympathy. Now, with the bigger content creators, people usually call them out, but I think because deadgirljimmie is a grand scheme of things on YouTube, is a relatively small creator and has developed a large number of parasocial relationships, we'll get into that a little bit later, people bought this. People allowed Jimmie to play the victim, and because we get a few of these little messages here, which are totally out of bounds, you should never send people any threats, but immediately, we're 9 seconds into the video, and Jimmie is getting sympathy from anybody watching, playing the victim.
There have been multiple people telling me to kill myself, multiple people threatening to find my address, and just...
That's my favorite part, the deep breath, the deep... I can do it too. See, I'll do it too.
to find my address. And
that right there, it feels performative. I'm just going to say it feels performative. Now, I can't say 100% for sure I'm not Jimmie. It feels performative.
Okay, so there's a lot we need to talk about here, but first order of business, likening Jimmie showing the unacceptable behavior directed at her to alleged child groomer Colleen Ballinger, and also mocking her shaky breath as she's talking about threats on her life. Shut the fuck up. Like, why are you, as a grown-ass man, making fun of and delegitimizing a woman's fear over being threatened for seemingly no valid reason? It's giving misogyny. Like, why can't you guys just be normal when criticizing Jimmie? Y'all gotta go out of your way to do some weirdo shit. Before we move on anymore though, this does involve something I feel I did wrong in my comment, as after I watched this part I kind of doubted that Crow has ever been in this position because of his attitude towards Jimmie, but after doing some research I found out that he apparently has been in a similar position at least one point, so I do apologize for coming in too hard on that front, but I will not apologize for my confusion at the staggering lack of empathy you showed in your video. Like, I saw people on Twitter celebrating her deactivating her Twitter, as well as people claiming that she was just running away. Crow doesn't agree with the celebrations, but he does refer to it as Jimmie running away and makes a really big stink out of this at the end where he claims this.
The difference is I don't hide behind the rude comments. I don't play the victim card.
God forbid Jimmie explained why she had to take a moment to gather her thoughts and parse through the legitimate criticism and avalanche of harassment in order to formulate an apology.
There's a lot of things I need to talk about today, but the first thing I want to talk about is how I've been receiving death threats. There have been multiple people telling me to kill myself, multiple people threatening to find my address, and just tons of comments of people calling me a racist. There's even people that have been trying to find my Steam account and comment stuff like this. It has been really overwhelming for me, that's why I'm making this video a bit late.
I don't understand how you can look at a video of someone showing the disgusting things they were told and having clear anxiety talking about them and just go, ugh, they were just looking for a way to play victim and be performative about it. Guys, do you have any empathy for Jimmie at all as a human being? I mean, I know the answer. You guys don't treat her like a human being. You order her around and demand that she say exactly what you want in the exact way that you want at the exact time that you want. How do you guys not realize how insanely objectifying that is? And isn't it just a touch ironic? Objectifying and harassing a brown woman in the name of anti-racism, you feel? I may be being overdramatic here, but like, this is disgusting and I'm kind of horrified at the absolute dehumanization of a brown person over this shit and the fact that y'all have deluded yourselves into thinking that this is woke and progressive. And I will say, Crow, I do not know why you feel so uncomfortable talking about the harassment you get and how it makes you feel. That's your personal decision, but you shaming Jimmie for being honest about the hurt she went through because of the harassment she faced is disgusting. No other way to say it. That's disgusting.
And I'm going to be more careful in the future with what I decide to name my videos and what subject I make them on. Another thing I need to talk about is me liking and hearting comments. I've been making content for over 6 years, and a way to show my appreciation to my viewers has always been liking and hearting comments no matter what. After everything that has happened, I realize now that that can be so dangerous because I've accidentally liked comments that were harming, rude, and even homophobic. I made a video about Sable and Michaela on Twitter a while back about how people ship them. After that post started blowing up, it just started getting tons and tons of comments. I just started skimming through the comments and not reading them fully and started liking them without knowing they were homophobic. I take full responsibility for being reckless like that, and I am so freaking sorry for making you guys think that I am homophobic.
Again, nothing I've seen or read from Jimmie's tweets, even from watching some of Jimmie's videos, nothing I've read or seen has supported that Jimmie is racist or homophobic. It's just kind of interesting, you know, it's enough to make someone raise their eyebrows, but there's not enough proof there.
I promise you with all my heart, I am not homophobic. I've learned from my actions, and now I'm going to be more careful on what comments I like in the future. I'm so very sorry for offending so many people, and I hope you all can forgive me. If not today, then I hope someday.
So as you can see, I just played out Jimmie's apology and Crow saying that he doesn't think Jimmie is like a hardcore bigot, just that her actions were eyebrow raising, which is great. Except for that he immediately follows it up with this.
Okay, so this apology is a complete nothing burger. This is the equivalent to when I understand that my wife is mad at me. Sometimes I jokingly say, whatever it was that I did, I'm sorry, I apologize. I clearly said something wrong, and whatever it was, I'm truly sorry. Know in my heart that I'm sorry. Obviously, that just makes her more upset. I should know what I did wrong. I should know what I said wrong. So, Jimmie, you're watching. It's the way you presented the video, the way you baited people. Using race to bait people like that, it's not okay.
Girl, what? That's your response? I saw this on Twitter, and I'm just gonna say to everyone on Twitter or like Crow who are saying that this apology is nothing or that it's not an apology and it's just an excuse, y'all are straight up just wrong. Like, objectively. I don't know how else to say it. Jimmie outright says, "Hey, I understand that I was insensitive with the title and thumbnail, and that me hearting every comment was irresponsible and offended people. I'm sorry, and I'll be more careful moving forward." Just because she's explaining the context of her decisions doesn't mean y'all just get to ignore her flat out saying that she knows they were bad and will avoid these mistakes in the future. You're fucking wrong.
Using a phrase like the Indians is not okay, because that separates them from you. And you're a faceless content creator. I don't see a lot of information in your profile to say what your cultural or ethnic background is, so I can't really say much beyond your 30-year-old Christian. When you say the Indians, you're putting distance between us and them, and that's a real problem. Creating any kind of us versus them, those people over there, I'm gonna support them by playing this video game character.
I feel like I'm going insane. This just in, you guys. Recognizing the specific ethnic group that was receiving racist hate is now racist. Fuck BLM, I guess. Fuck hashtag stop Asian hate. That's othering racial groups and making an us versus them situation. Fuck! Get me out of this hellscape! Actually, you know what? Yeah, I'm done talking about this video. I don't have anything else to say, so we're moving on to the last white woman left that we still have to talk about.
And now, these messages.
The final person we'll be talking about today is Vulpixia, who I'll be referring to as Anna for the rest of this video because it's easier. So, Anna is a Dead by Daylight content creator who mostly streams, but she also has a roster of videos on her YouTube channel. Anna is also someone whose community I used to be a part of, and I genuinely loved her work back in 2022 and 2023. And while I fell out of touch with her content last year as I stopped playing the game, I did always come around every once in a while to her videos. I respected her as a content creator and progressive ally, and she even followed me on Twitter. That is until I disagreed with her approach to Jimmie's video. Initially, I approached Anna in good faith and even specified that I was not ascribing any intention to her while making her aware that Jimmie is a brown person, since the conversation seemed to completely omit that, again whether intentionally or not, with people even calling Jimmie a white woman in Anna's replies. From there, I got educated by her on the fact that marginalized groups can be bigoted against their own and have internalized prejudice, and also align themselves with bigoted structures and systems, as well as perpetuate acts of bigotry. Thanks, Anna. I would have never known. After pointing out how I am every marginalized demographic that she felt the need to educate me on, she explained that she felt the need to do so because I guess dared to posit that the race of people involved in a racialized situation matters, and she admitted that she didn't care that Jimmie's a brown woman. I continued to try and bring humanity and empathy to the table to show that this was more likely a misstep and misunderstanding than someone from a privileged position taking advantage of bigotry against the marginalized for personal gain. And had she executed the video maybe a smidge differently, I would find it really sweet. I use that to say that we shouldn't be putting so much scrutiny on her intent in terms of speculating all the awful reasons people think she may have had for making the video. I even pointed out that the scrutiny against her tone was potentially, and now I think completely, inappropriate, as I'm not even sure that English is Jimmie's first language, as, again, indigenous girl from Alaska. Yeah, isn't it funny how with more context the scrutiny on her tone can actually be seen as an ignorant and racist act? Not to mention that there are factors outside of language that can affect someone's relation to tone. For instance, I am friends with a plethora of neurodivergent people and am one myself. Do you know how many of them struggle with not only picking up on tone from others, but delivering it themselves? So yeah, maybe just don't do that. It's inappropriate. So anyways, Anna ignored all of that and decided to just passive-aggressively redirect me to another Twitter thread so that I could again be educated on the intricacies of bigotry, particularly over how the impact of a person's actions should not be disregarded in favor of potential good intentions. We'll get into that in a bit. But even now you might remember and have noticed that I didn't fucking do that. And in fact, people criticizing Jimmie have been very obsessed with what her intent may have been. And after pointing that out, as well as just the overall bad faith interpretation of that idea that people have run with, Anna unfollowed me. It may be a small act on paper, but oh my god did it say a lot to me in the moment. The fact that you were screaming, "Listen to POC," but all it took was my brown ass not falling into the avalanche of scrutiny against Jimmie for you to completely disregard anything I had to say in an extremely condescending way and unfollow me was very telling. I'll just say that. And the fact that your response to me pointing out how your way of talking about the situation erased Jimmie's identity and painted her in a worse light was literally, I don't care, is fucking crazy. Let me just say this for anyone who needs to hear it. Brown and black people are not pawns in your chess game of Twitter activism. We are people with a lifetime of history as brown people that has shaped our minds on how we deal with racism, what we like to see from others, how we carry ourselves, and what we decide is worthy of our time and offense in relation to the subject. And the fact that you don't care about that when hounding down a brown person for doing something tone deaf in relation to race actually low-key sickens me. I don't understand how you can try to be race blind in a conversation revolving around race and racism. And since you brought up that people of color are who you get your info on anti-racism from, I'm curious, which one of them told you that race isn't important in a situation involving racism? Or have you not found a Twitter thread that explains the importance of that yet? Also, to jump off the last point, and I know you've heard this before, Anna, but we are not a monolith. Seriously, do you know how many brown and black people I've spoken to about the situation who, from the get-go, think this entire situation, including the scrutiny of the clip itself, is completely ridiculous? But none of that matters because you always get to fall back onto, well, POC were hurt. That means we're in the right. Well, Anna, since I was hurt and disregarded by your treatment of me as a white person in a racially charged conversation because of your seemingly total unwillingness to engage, do I now suddenly get to hound you on Twitter or Blue Sky and in this video wherein I assume the worst of you and speculate on all the awful intentions you may have had in that conversation? With a little use of a tool we should all become intimate with called empathy, we might see the issue here. You see, while I appreciate and respect that you have clearly done work to educate yourself on issues that do not negatively affect you personally, I feel like you have taken the learnings to an ill-advised place. Because you see, the sentiment you felt the need to teach me about because I dared to include nuance in the conversation is basic. Newsflash, Anna, I did not, nor do I need to learn about how impact of bigoted sentiment and actions matters from a fucking Twitter thread. Seriously, who do you think you are talking to? You want to talk about things that are tone deaf? That right there. When a brown person is trying to invite you into engaging with a more nuanced view of the situation, and your answer is to slap them with the most basic talking points on an issue that has shaped no less than a huge part of their life, acting like you really did something. Who do you think is impacted by token pick-me racial minorities, sexual minorities, women, when their voices get picked up? Because I'll give you a hint on the racial front, it's not fucking you. So you can save the Twitter education for someone else. I promise. But you know what? Let's get into it. The phrase impact over intent is meant to discourage and fight against the disregarding and downplaying of offense taken from or harm done to a targeted minority. Again, you might have noticed in our conversation, I literally never did that and even said I wasn't trying to stop the criticisms. All I did say was that I did not like how the situation was being painted to remove Jimmie's status as a brown person, something that does matter and changes the context of the situation, and gave insight as to how I, a very marginalized person in society, like to meet those incidents. So, in effect, you're not really saying that impact matters more so much as you're saying that intent simply doesn't matter. A wildly different sentiment than the former, much more harmful to, and a gross oversimplification of the discourse, and one that can really only be reached if you heard about impact mattering and mentally checked out of the conversation. Because how do you stop your line of questioning after essentially answering the question, has harm occurred? Is that seriously where you have decided your line of questioning begins and ends? And even then, I feel the need to point out that overstatement of harm is a thing, and not every perceived issue is valid. With every situation that I have lined up today in which a person of color was offended or harmed, are we seriously going to look at them and come to the conclusion that they are all the same and should be handled the same simply because harm occurred? If yes, good job! You have entered into an entirely unhelpful and uninsightful dogma, and I don't trust from what I've seen that you guys would handle these situations in a way that reflects the very real differences they all hold. Cause girl, if that's how I was gonna handle this situation, I would've just called all y'all fake woke and moved on with my day. But I know that's not fair, so I'm not doing that. If my melanated ass may be angry for a second, I am so fucking tired of this listen to POC refrain, because barely ever nowadays is it what the phrase means. It so often means listen to POC who are the loudest, most angry, most authoritative, or in some case scenarios means listen to what I imagine POC would say on the topic. Because when a POC jumps in who white people can't use to do epic ponage on the a dirty, horrible racist, suddenly it's shut the fuck up, no one is on your side. And total disregard. Is this woke, you guys? Telling brown people who don't agree with your approach and are bringing attention to vital information being left out that's leading to misconstructions of the situation to shut the fuck up and make them feel like they're alone? What the fuck are you guys doing to activism? The way these people, and I'm not even really talking about Anna for this part in specific, have described Jimmie as a shitty person and put so much emphasis on her character as a bad person and disgusting human being is so revealing to me about how these people view bigotry and prejudice. Because every single person in this community, every single person in the United States of goddamn America, every single person in the world has some type of bigotry in their brain. But the way people act, you'd think they were Republicans talking about the fucking gender binary. You're either born a racist or a non-racist. And if you're a racist, we're banishing you to Racist Island, away from the non-racists. The good ones. Well, I think we've already discussed that that's not how it works. Racism has infected every single one of us in one way or another. Even you, oh so valiant allies. And no amount of telling brown people who misstep or don't agree with you to delete their accounts or to shut the fuck up will get rid of that. I'ma be honest. Y'all had me for a second. Y'all really had me questioning if all this nonsense was justified because of the wrong stuff Jimmie did do. Y'all had me asking, is it really fair that white people are telling her to delete her account and cheering on her downfall because of this one misstep? And in the end, I've decided, no, none of that was normal. And if I'm honest, fuck y'all for ever trying to make me think it was. Am I seriously the crazy person here for talking about how a brown person messing up in a racial context maybe deserves more understanding and empathy? Is that seriously the unwoke take here? I honestly feel disenfranchised in a movement meant to help my marginalized demographic, made even more depressing when allies of the struggle championing the cause like to act like they're speaking for me, when in actuality I feel completely unheard. But listen to POC, right guys? Be educated and listen. Fuck off. I knew from the get-go what you guys were gonna do once Jimmie talked about all the shit she got from the situation after it got blown out of proportion. Because it's what y'all always do. Y'all just sit there and say, I never bullied anyone. Cause remember guys, the snowflake never need feel responsible for the avalanche, even though you helped facilitate and allowed a situation where a brown woman's status as a brown woman was completely stripped away from her to misconstrue her intentions and ignored, disregarded, and unfollowed another brown person who made you aware of that very problem. Good job, white woman. You did that. Anyways, fun fact, you guys. Remember that video by thecroshow that I criticized? The one that dehumanized Jimmie and also dishonestly misconstrued her apology for her actions? Well, Anna shared that video and propped it up as a good video. Oh, and look at that, she even mentioned Crow's racial identity. Isn't that funny? Now it matters. So Anna, am I to assume that this comfortably lands you in the camp of people assuming the worst in Jimmie's actions and her intent? Can you guys just admit that you want Jimmie to be racist and homophobic? Literally, what other reason is there for refusing to do anything but assume the worst of her? This is what I meant when I said that the bitches criticizing Jimmie were the ones obsessed with intent. Coming from the side who was shouting impact over intent, y'all seem real preoccupied with the intent, which in theory is fine because again, it does matter, but when your only interest on the intent is speculating the absolute worst possible interpretations, then that's simply in bad faith and you look goofy. I am running out of things to say on this topic, but I will say, if you do decide to respond to this, Anna, could you, I don't know, decide to treat me with some dignity this time and bless me with a unique thought instead of condescendingly redirecting me to Twitter threads that helped you learn about the plight I have to live with? That would much be preferred. You too, Croshow. In fact, I want both of you to be intimately aware of the fact that if either of you do respond to this video and I decide to respond, I won't completely disregard what you have to say. Because I'm not fucking like that. And neither should y'all be. I guess as a send-off to all the white people who partook in this situation in the way that I have described, let's be honest, you guys are giving white saviors that care more about a performative gotcha than actually helping brown people. Especially given the way y'all treat brown people who don't agree with just full-on public execution. I'ma leave y'all with a familiar line to sleep on if you guys really do care about racism. Do fucking better. And that's about all I want to say on this topic for today. This video will probably not change that many minds, if any. This issue has been a problem for years and will continue to be one so long as self-reflection and empathy are put on the back burner. I can't change that, but I'm at least gonna be heard on the issue. Whether this video gets hate, praise, or some combination of the two, I'ma keep it pushing, and you should expect to see at least one more video this year from me if you're lucky. I have some old scripts from back in the day from when I was working on my old channel, and even after my 2 years of absence, they still hold up, so I'ma bring them here. So look forward to all of that. And in the meantime, follow my socials. I have new social media made strictly for my art so that it doesn't get cluttered in all the other stuff I post and retweet and stuff. And I do in fact have a blue sky for people who are not on Twitter anymore, which is totally understandable. I also suggest that you follow my TikTok, as I've been making quite a bit of short form content and you'll be able to see all the mini adventures I take. With that, I hope y'all have a good time after this. Especially for my American viewers. I know that it's rough right now, but we got each other.